All right, welcome back, friends. Today we're going to talk about how to lose weight despite menopause or thyroid issues. And this is going to include perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, and also multiple thyroid issues, meaning you could have a clinically underactive thyroid or hypothyroid, or you may not have a thyroid at all. And so today I'm going to dive deep into pretty much exactly what we've been able to do with all of the clients that we've worked with successfully who have sort of these conditions, so to speak, to get great and sustainable results so that you can now know, A, what are some of the things that you have to overcome in order to get results, and also to do that sustainably, but also just to clear up some of the confusion around whether it is actually possible to do this or not. And I think that's where I want to start first, is there is a very unhelpful, very unhealthy narrative going around the world, the communities, the medical community, especially the fitness industry, that it is nearly impossible or impossible to lose weight if you are in menopause or have an underactive thyroid or have no thyroid, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to just start by saying this is patently, completely false. It is not true. I actually have a client in our program right now, and she is menopausal and she has no thyroid. She had her thyroid removed due to thyroid cancer in the past. Prior to coming into our program and working with us at Healthy and Whole, she could not lose weight. Right? She was very, very frustrated, hadn't been able to get any results. Now, and I'll actually throw her graph up here on the screen, and you can actually see she's consistently losing weight now. She's a few weeks into our program. She's down 12 pounds already, and she has a very consistent trend line on the graph. So she alone is a great example of someone who can lose weight despite her menopause and her thyroid issues. I'm using and I'm telling her story for a very significant reason, because she went to the doctor after having been several weeks into this program and losing weight, and her doctor told her it would be nearly impossible for her to lose weight, despite the fact that she was actually already losing weight. And so I wanted to start with this because I think one of the biggest reasons that many women in particular struggle with weight loss is because they have just heard this narrative over and over and over again. It's been sort of beaten and crammed into their brains and into their hearts that they simply aren't going to be able to lose weight because they're in menopause or because they have an underactive thyroid or no thyroid at all. And it's just not true. The problem is that once you've heard this enough, it kind of almost takes roots and becomes a false belief. And once we've adopted a false belief like this, it sort of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we actually are not able to lose weight, not because we're not capable, but because we're not really pursuing it in a way that would yield the results that we want, because we have this false belief. So right off the bat, in order for us to have any success at all, we have to suspend this false belief that you can't lose weight due to menopause or due to thyroid issues. And instead, we have to open ourselves up to being open to learning how. How is it possible? How could we do this and do it sustainably? And understanding that just because something has been said time and time and time again, just because a doctor says it, does not make it true. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys. Now, the next example I want to throw up on the screen here is another great example of this. This is Pam, one of our clients. She's lost about 50 pounds. And you can see by the pictures here on the screen, she's not only lost that weight, but she's actually now been in maintenance for years now. And she went from where she started 50 pounds up, lost all 50 pounds. And if you see her, she's like shredded. She's post-menopause. She still has a thyroid, but she could not lose weight before coming into our program. And now she has not only lost the weight, but she has maintained it. And she looks incredible, right? She actually became a personal trainer now, which, if you can believe that, she went from not having any progress whatsoever to actually losing the weight and becoming so passionate about it that she now serves other people as a personal trainer, which is mind-blowing, right? So I wanted to start with these just two very quick examples to just dispel this false belief that this isn't possible. It is possible if you know the hurdles that you have to overcome and how to overcome those hurdles and some of the very nuanced things that we need to make sure we're paying attention to and being very deliberate about throughout this process, then we can do it. Okay. And that's what I'm going to introduce you guys to, and I'm going to show you guys as we go throughout this talk here. Okay. So the first thing that we have to start to understand is what's actually happening when it comes to menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, thyroid issues, having an underactive thyroid. What is actually happening to us, to our metabolism, that is actually causing this to make things much more difficult for us, right? And so I think it's important that we get really good clarity on that, okay? Now, it is true when it comes to menopause and the hormonal impacts of menopause, and when it comes to an underactive thyroid or not having a thyroid, it is true that there is an impact on our overall metabolism. And that impact shows up in a number of different ways. One way that it shows up is that our engine kind of idles at a lower rate to some extent, meaning, yes, your metabolism is just slightly lower than, say, it was before menopause or before those hormonal impacts or before you had an underactive thyroid, okay? But it's not, the percentage of that impact is not what people think it is, right? It's actually relatively small. Now, the bigger impact that's actually, as a coach, I've really seen impacting people far more than the actual biological downplay of a person's metabolism in menopause or with a thyroid condition is actually just due to the way that these conditions make people feel. When you are, say, entering into perimenopause and then menopause and then postmenopause, there are such huge impacts to how you feel, your energy levels on a daily basis, your sleep, your hunger, all sorts of things like that are impacted. You're more sensitive to stressors and different things like that. Same thing with a thyroid condition. You know, what is the number one symptom of an underactive thyroid, right? It's feeling tired all the time, right? Among other symptoms. And so you have these physical biological symptoms that are impacting how good, how energetic, how ready for action we feel on a daily basis. And that tends to impact folks when it comes to a metabolism standpoint far more than their actual metabolism being decreased due to hormonal impacts. Why? Because they're not getting out and being active as much. They're not working out or strength training as much. There's things, their daily activity is often down because they just don't feel like doing much and this, that, and the other. So there's a number of variables here. Yes, due to hormonal impacts, a person's metabolism is slightly lower, but it's also lower just because oftentimes women just don't feel like doing as much due to how they feel with menopause or their thyroid condition, okay? But what is really important to understand is that just because you don't feel as good or just because these things are present does not mean you actually can't lose weight. There is nothing biologically that has happened that has actually made it impossible for you to lose weight. Your body can actually burn fat just as well as it could before. The difference is, and it kind of goes back to what we always talk about as the gold standard for weight loss, right? Weight loss is truly a calories in versus calories out game that we have to play in order to get into a calorie deficit. And getting into a calorie deficit, we can then see prolonged, consistent weight loss, okay? Now, the problem is that when it comes to being menopausal or having an underactive thyroid, our metabolism is a little bit lower due to both biological reasons and lower activity reasons. So what that means is we have a lower basal metabolism, right? We have a lower metabolism due to our lower activity already. That means in order to get into a calorie deficit, we actually have to work harder. We have to cut deeper, so to speak, in order to get into a calorie deficit that would produce weight loss that is motivational. And that becomes very sort of difficult. And it's difficult for a number of reasons. Okay. So I'm going to throw up a slide here on the screen just to really illustrate this. And I want to paint the picture between a sort of a normal person's metabolism who is not menopausal or struggling with thyroid condition, and then show you kind of the visual difference between metabolism of someone who is dealing with menopause or thyroid issues, okay? So what you see here on the screen is initially you see kind of that line on the top is sort of like represents maintenance calorie intake when it comes to food intake, right? And then what you see, that line on the bottom, that represents sort of the lower limit of what we could intake when it comes to, say, like food, in order to be in a calorie deficit, but do it safely. All right. And so what you see between these two lines is what I call the margin for your calorie deficit. It's how much space you have to play with. It's how much margin you have to play with to put yourself into a calorie deficit, right? So you have more margin to play with when you have a normal metabolism, normal activity levels, all of that stuff. And so what that means is you have more margin for error, and you can get into a deeper calorie deficit. You can cut your food back more. You can create a deeper calorie deficit with activity and exercise and things like that without sort of running into limits or limitations. And so that means you can achieve a faster rate of weight loss, which is more exciting, and you can cheat more. You can have more oopsies, so to speak, and you can still see pretty decent weight loss. You have more margin for error, which all of that is great, right? Now, where we get into trouble when we start to get into menopause or we have a thyroid issue and different things like that is due to the way we feel. We don't have as much energy. We're more tired. It's harder for us to get up and get to moving. It's harder to motivate ourselves to get to the gym and to work out. And biologically, hormonally, our engine's running a little bit slower, right? So what that means is we can still get into a calorie deficit, but the problem is our margin is actually way smaller. And the reason for that is because our metabolism is already kind of lower because of all these things, which means there's less of a gap between our sort of like standard maintenance calorie intake and what that lower limit would be to be able to achieve a calorie deficit safely. Meaning we can only cut so much when it comes to our food intake, and we can only exercise so much before we've reached sort of the limits of sustainability to achieve an actual calorie deficit. And this is huge for two reasons. Number one, it means we actually have way less margin for error. Okay. And it also means that even once we do get into a calorie deficit, most of the time when we're working with the client with these conditions, it's a shallower calorie deficit, which means you're going to lose at a slower rate of weight loss, right? And so you're it's a double whammy because one, the smaller things will plateau you, right? Smaller mistakes or cheats will plateau you, and you're not losing as fast, so it's not as motivational, right? It's more easy to become demotivated. Now I want to go back to this slide. The first client I talked about, and this is our client who is menopausal and has no thyroid. Okay, so she's like total supplemental thyroid medication, and she's, as you can see, she's doing really good. She's now in a consistent calorie deficit, losing weight very, very consistently. And what you see here on this graph, you see this red line at the top of her graph. I put that red line there because that represents like the first 2 weeks of her weight loss journey with us. And almost every client, whether you're menopausal or not, whether you have thyroid or not, it doesn't matter. You're going to achieve a higher than normal, almost unreasonably high weight loss rate in the first 2 weeks because your body's adapting to that weight loss and you're dropping a lot of water weight and different things like that in those first couple weeks. So I tend to disregard that first 2 weeks when I'm trying to figure out what kind of an actual calorie deficit, what kind of a weight loss rate is my client achieving, okay? So I disregard that. Now what you see with these purple lines is once she got through those initial couple of weeks of weight loss, she settled into a very, very consistent calorie deficit. And I actually went through and I calculated her calorie deficit. And you can actually see, based on the trend lines here on her graph, she actually had a slightly higher weight loss rate of about 1.26 pounds per week for about 4 weeks. And then just recently in the last couple of weeks, she had a very, very slight adjustment in her weight loss rate down to about 1.2 pounds per week, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to paint you a picture here. So what you see here is if you're losing at 1.26 pounds per week, that comes out to a daily calorie deficit of about 630 calories, okay? Because 1 pound of fat lost per week is about 3,500 calories. So if we're losing at 1.26 pounds per week, you take 1.26 times 3,500 divided by 7 gives you a calorie deficit of about 630 calories per day. And now in the last couple of weeks, she's been closer to 1.2 pounds per week, which is 600 calories per day. Now, this is super important to understand for a couple of reasons, okay? Number one, let's imagine that you are just like this client, you are in a consistent calorie deficit because you've dialed in your food and you're being active. Between your activity and your food, you are in a consistent 600 calorie per day deficit, okay? Now, that's exciting. She's really excited about this, right? She's like, oh my gosh, I'm actually losing weight. This is amazing. But it's still very difficult because with only a 600 calorie per day deficit, you have very little margin for error, right? If this client has even just a 300 calorie oopsie, okay, then what happens there? She took her 600 calorie deficit for the day, and because she ate some chips out of the bag or she finished the nuggets on her kid's plate or whatever that might be, she consumed 300 calories that she wasn't really mindful of. Well, now that deficit of 600 calories a day is now down to 300 calories a day, and she just went from 1.2 pounds per week down to 0.6 pounds per week. Okay. And that's difficult because now we're in a space where we're losing, but we're losing so slow that it actually feels like we might not be losing at all. And that can be extremely detrimental mentally, emotionally. And that's actually where a lot of women in particular struggle with this. Is it's not actually that they're not able to get into a calorie deficit, they're not able to be successful. It's just with such a small margin for error and a shallow calorie deficit, it really can mess with your head, right? Because you really don't have much room for error, okay? And so this means is that it's still possible and it still can be sustainable, but it requires a very, very deliberate approach in order to do it effectively, okay? And so we've got to work within that shallow calorie deficit, and we've got to be super deliberate. Now, what does that mean? The big bullet point number one here is that accuracy and consistency now become, paramount, essential to success. Even if you weren't in menopause or didn't have any thyroid issues whatsoever, obviously being accurate with your food intake and tracking things accurately and being consistent is essential to your results, right? But when you have a shallow calorie deficit to work with and very little margin for error, accuracy and consistency are non-negotiables, right? Because the reality of your calorie deficit margin leaves so little room for error that you've got to be very, 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 very accurate and very, 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 very consistent, okay? Just to give the example, I mentioned before, just a 300 calorie oopsie, right? That would be, I was actually down in the kitchen a few days ago for a party. We had a party for my son, a birthday party, and we had chips and dip and all sorts of stuff. It was a cheat kind of a day for me. And but I was eating tortilla chips out of the tortilla chip bag, and I just, for giggles, thought I'd turn the bag over and look at the back of the bag. And as I'm looking at the back of the bag and I'm looking at the label, it says one serving of these tortilla chips is 140 calories, and that is for 7 chips, just 7 chips. And I'm like, I could eat 7 chips in 30 seconds because these things are so dang good. They're salty, they're crunchy. I just want to keep eating and eating and eating. And so that means that in roughly, let's say 60 seconds to 2 minutes max of chewing and crunching, I could easily eat 300 calories. I could easily eat 14 chips in 2 or 3 minutes. No big deal, right? So it's so easy to do that. And boom, if we're in this situation, in this calorie deficit reality, we've just halved our weight loss that day, our calorie deficit that day, just because we mindlessly ate 14 chips out of a bag, right? Doesn't mean it's not possible, but these are the realities that we have to face. Another great example, right? Having one 1,500 calorie cheat meal in a week, right? If your deficit is about 4,200 calories a day, which is what this client is at, about 4,200 calories a week, 600 calories a day. One meal, one supplemental cheat meal that's 1,500 calories would take that weight loss for the week down to 0.75 pounds per week, which again is now slow enough that it feels like you might not be getting any results at all. So we have to really face this calories in versus calories out, shallow margin for error reality if we're going to be successful in doing this, okay? That's number one. So accuracy and consistency are absolutely essential for success. Now, accuracy, I want to just harp on accuracy here for a minute, because consistency, okay, I get it, Matt. I need to do the same. I need to be very consistent every day, hit that deficit every day so that I can see my consistent weight loss. But accuracy requires a lot. One of the things that I run into as a coach is most of the people coming into our program to work with us and to be coached by us at Healthy and Whole don't have really good educational background when it comes to nutrition. A lot of people think they do. I mean, we have a lot of women who come into the program who think, I've been on so many diets, I've been through, I've worked with a nutritionist before, I've done all this, I know all that I need to know about food. I just can't do it, right? And first thing I always say is, well, if you know what to do and you're not doing it, then you don't know what to do. Because if you knew what to do, you would be doing it. And just, we can do some things to lose weight, but just because we can do things and lose weight doesn't mean we can do things and lose weight sustainably. Those are two different things. So we have to tackle that right out of the gate. But the key here is you've really got to understand food. You have to really have a really good grasp on understanding food and fat versus carbohydrates and protein and how to balance your meals and able to look at a food and at a label and to understand it. Otherwise, you're going to fall prey to, it's so easy to mismeasure or just be a little bit off in your accuracy of your food. And think about it. So 2 tablespoons of peanut butter is about 200 calories, right? I mean, just a 2 tablespoon oopsie can totally demolish or have your success rate for the day. So we've got to be accurate. In order to be accurate, we have to really become super knowledgeable about the food that we're eating and be very, very diligent about it. Okay, moving on to the second really essential thing when it comes to being able to have actual long-term success with menopause and thyroid is we've got to have increased daily activity, i.e. steps walked, and strength training within sustainable limits. This is all essential. And the reason I say this is because we have what's called our basal metabolic rate, which is essentially our metabolic rate just sitting still. Like I'm sitting at this desk. I'm talking to you guys on this camera. I'm not up, I'm not moving around, but I am burning calories right now. My heart is pumping, my muscles are burning energy. I am sitting here, my body is sustaining me as I'm sitting here, and there's a certain calorie burn per minute that I'm achieving right now. But I'm at rest, okay? Now, I could get up and I could go for a walk, right? I could set a step goal for 8,000 steps a day, which is what we set for all of our clients, ideally. I could set a goal to work out 3 times a week doing strength training, which is the goal that we use with our clients. And doing all of those things is going to take my basal metabolic rate, which is just how many calories I burn being lazy sitting here at this desk, and it's going to increase my metabolism because I'm getting out and intentionally moving my body and burning those extra calories. So it's important to understand that while, yes, your basal metabolic rate might be decreased a little bit due to hormonal fluctuations and different things like that, menopause and deficiencies with thyroid and all that stuff, you can actually still increase your metabolism immediately right now by getting up and going for a walk, by moving your body, by strength training, by doing things like that. And so it is extremely essential if we're trying to achieve sustainable long-term weight loss in menopause and with thyroid issues, or one or the other, that we focus on increasing daily activity within sustainable limits. And again, we shoot for 8 to 10,000 steps a day. 8 is a perfectly sustainable number. 8,000 steps a day will get you great results. And 3 30 to 45 minute, ideally, strength training workouts a week. Those two things combined can do a lot for one's metabolism, okay? Now, I understand that being in menopause, thyroid issues, energy levels are down, et cetera, it can be sometimes hard to motivate yourself to do those things, which is why a lot of our clients come to us because they want someone to encourage them. They want someone to push them to get up even when they don't feel like it. They want someone to hold them accountable to those things. And you may need that as well. But just by getting up and getting moving and learning how to do some strength training and getting consistent with that, it takes your slower metabolism and it builds on it, right? If you do this right, you could actually take that shallow margin and actually increase it a little bit, giving yourself more margin for error. You could actually increase your weight loss rate by really doing this and optimizing the calories outside of your metabolism, okay? So this is just so essential because you have to understand that the less you move, the less calories you burn. And the less you burn, the less you can eat to stay in a calorie deficit, okay? Now, the other thing you have to understand is that when it comes to strength training is absolutely essential because what people don't understand is that your metabolism, the vast majority of your metabolism is built off of your muscle tissue. Your muscle tissue is always burning calories. Just as I'm sitting here right now, my muscle tissue is burning the majority of my calories that are being burnt right now. Fat tissue actually burns some calories, but it's like an LED bulb versus a fire. It's like very different in how much energy fat tissue burns versus muscle tissue. So we want to have as much muscle on our body as possible because that will mean we're burning more calories at rest, okay? So, but the problem with that is if we have already lost a lot of muscle tissue from past weight loss attempts done incorrectly, or we're trying now to lose weight without strength training, then the thing that we're going to run into is we're going to lose more muscle tissue in that process than we really want to, which means we're going to end the journey at our goal weight with less muscle than we had before, which means our metabolism is even lower than before, which means we have to eat even less to maintain the weight once we get there. And we won't look the way we wanted to look and all that stuff. So both increasing daily activity level, ideally to somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 steps a day is ideal. And then doing those 30 to 45 minute strength training workouts a week is super important to make sure you maintain your muscle and your metabolism, and that you actually increase your metabolism with the calories out intentionality that you're doing there, deepening your margin, increasing your weight loss rate potentially. And just understand, it's extremely difficult, not impossible, but extremely difficult to be successful with long-term sustainable weight loss without doing this. Why? Because if we don't do this, we have to cut even deeper with our food. And there's only so much we can cut in how much we eat and what we eat before it becomes completely miserable and unsustainable. So this is actually really, really important. Okay. Now, hammering home the next big thing that is super essential is protein intake. The reality that we have to understand is that we basically, in order to, in this situation, in this reality of menopause and or thyroid, underactive thyroid or no thyroid, having this lower metabolism, struggling with activity levels, all of that, the shallower margin for error, we basically have a lower daily calorie intake that we can shoot for in order to achieve results. We basically have to eat less than is ideal in order to achieve results. And what that means is when you're consuming less calories, and this is true for anybody who's in a weight loss journey, but it's especially true for those who have to cut a little bit deeper in menopause or with thyroid issues. When we're eating less food, there's less opportunity for us to eat the amount of protein that we need to sustain our muscle tissue and to sustain our fullness. Okay. So what that means is if you're consuming 1,000 calories a day and you're achieving consistent weight loss at that 1,000 calories a day, then a greater percentage of that has to be protein to make sure that you're meeting your minimal protein needs. We like to see a client eating at least 100 grams of protein minimum a day. We typically will strive for closer to 1 gram of protein per pound of goal body weight if we can. But 100 is just a nice round minimum number that most women are going to do very well with, okay? But if you think about that, okay, that means that at least 400 calories of 1,000 calorie daily intake has got to come from protein. 40% of that has got to come from protein. Okay. We actually shoot for 50% of total calories taken in to be from protein with our clients who we're working with in this capacity. Why? Because we've got to make sure they get the protein in. Otherwise, they're going to lose muscle mass. And we've got to make sure they're feeling full and satiated given a lower, or what some might perceive as kind of an extreme low calorie intake in order to achieve a calorie deficit. Okay. So the protein is absolutely essential for both of those reasons. We got to feel full and satisfied, and you've got to get that protein in to maintain your muscle mass and all the other bodily processes that protein is essential for. Okay. So this is just one reason why in our cookbook at Healthy and Whole, we have a cookbook that has about 160 recipes in it. Every single meal recipe and every single snack recipe in that cookbook is a minimum of 50% protein, exactly for this reason, because we work with so many women who are perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, or some kind of a thyroid condition or other hormonal issues, that we know that we've got to make sure that they're getting that protein intake in. So we don't even give them a recipe that's less than 50% protein. Okay. So protein is super essential for those two things. We got to feel full and satiated, and we've got to get that protein intake. Otherwise, we're going to lose too much muscle mass, and other things can start to become an issue there as well. Next, additional nutritional support may be needed. Now, again, just like protein, when we're at a lower calorie intake than is ideal in order to achieve a calorie deficit due to some of these other issues, again, it's less opportunity to take in key nutrients, right? So we talked about protein, but what about vitamins? What about minerals? What about some of the essential fatty acids that we need, like omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, all those different things? When you're in a calorie deficit, in a restricted calorie, low calorie environment to achieve the weight loss that we need, there's less opportunity to take those in. And so it's likely for a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people, it's usually just a safe thing to go ahead and supplement to make sure that you're getting the nutritional support that you need. The three most common things that I just recommend most people do would be a multivitamin, take some fish oils as well to make sure you're getting your omega-3s in, and probably at least like for most people who live in the United States here in Indiana, for example, in colder climates, you're probably going to want to have some vitamin D as well. Also good to have those blood markers tested regularly, at least every 6 months, just to see how you're doing with your key nutrients, with your vitamin D, with your omega-3 levels, things like that, just to make sure that you're not getting yourself into a deficiency with those, because we have to cut a little bit deeper in order to achieve a viable calorie deficit with menopause or thyroid issues. You don't have the opportunity. You got to make sure that you're getting those in. Okay. So those are the most common things that are really holding folks back. The biggest one, though, that I think holds a lot of people back is the fact that they just are out there doing it on their own. And so we've coached a ton of women through this process. We've coached women through this process from start to finish, just like Pam, who are in menopause or postmenopause, who have thyroid issues or no thyroid at all. We've coached diabetics from type 2 diabetes, full blown, to completely normal A1C levels. We've done all of this stuff, but the reason we're able to do it is because we are providing a high level of coaching and a high level of support. And I've just found across the board that is essential for a lot of women to be successful, because there's so many variables going on here. You have such a shallow deficit or a shallow margin of error, and there's so many different things that can be impacting A, your actual rate of progress, and B, how you're perceiving and seeing your actual rate of progress, right? So, there could be things that are drifting in your food intake that could easily cause a plateau. There could just be hormonal fluctuations that are happening that could cause what we call a false plateau on the scale, making you think that it's not working, and then you're getting frustrated, and then you're self-sabotaging. There's so many different things that can happen with such a shallow margin for error that ongoing coaching and ongoing support are pretty essential to make sure that you're kind of being supervised and encouraged through this process and being able to hit the accuracy and hit the consistency that you need to see consistent results, but also being able to sort of be coached along the way mentally and emotionally, understanding when the scale isn't moving, why that's happening and what's happening and what to tweak, if anything, or if it's just a thing where you just need to be consistent and understand that your body's just holding on to water and how those fluctuations happen. It just is really, really, for the vast majority of people, they need ongoing close supervision, guidance, encouragement, and all that throughout the entire process. And so, if you are a female and you're entering into either premenopause, or perimenopause, or menopause, or postmenopause, or you are, no matter what age you're at, you're finding yourself with an underactive thyroid or maybe no thyroid at all, and you're trying to navigate all this stuff and you're like super overwhelmed by all of it, then this is my biggest recommendation to you: is stop trying to do it on your own and figure out all this stuff and all these variables and trying to figure out what it all means on your own, and just get help from someone who knows this and has done it and understands these roadblocks and can coach you and encourage you through this process in an effective way. Because we not only have to get started and get you into a calorie deficit so that you're seeing that and doing it consistently and seeing consistent results, but then we also have to get you and keep you in that all the way to your goal weight range. And then once we get you into that goal weight range, we still then have to transition you, help you transition out of that calorie deficit into calorie maintenance and not overshooting that and starting to gain weight back. So it's a delicate process. It is totally possible. We do it all the time, and it can be very sustainable, but we've got to do some very deliberate things along the way in order to do it safely and to do it sustainably, making sure that you're enjoying the process, making sure that you are enjoying food and not feeling super restricted the entire way, making sure that you can take some breaks here and there and really enjoy yourself, and that we're turning this into an actual lifestyle that is going to be sustainable, and that we're not just going like, just balls to the wall and just really cutting deep just to get the results, and we're not at all being sustainable. We've got to be very deliberate about that. So if you're frustrated and you're feeling like you could just really use a team behind you, then reach out to someone. We've done this a lot. And if you want to reach out to us, depending on what platform you're watching this on, if you're on YouTube, there's links down below in the description where you can reach out to us for help. You can apply for our coaching program. There's some free resources down there as well. And then really on the other side, if you're on Facebook or one of the other platforms where we're at, just comment or send us a message and we will respond, and we'll talk through and we'll kind of explore whether it's going to be a great fit for us to work together or not. And if it is, we'll be super excited. We'll move forward and we'll get started on this and doing this the right way with you. And if it's not a good fit, then we will point you in the direction of what we think is a better fit or a better approach for you. So hopefully this has been helpful. If it has, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, the little thumbs up. Really tells YouTube that what we're doing here is valuable to you and that you like what you're seeing and what you're getting, and that you want more of that. And then if you do that, it'll actually show what we're teaching here to more people on YouTube, and it'll help us to be able to keep doing what we're doing here. So I super appreciate you guys for hanging with me on this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.